My name is Claire Bennett. I am 28 years old, and the morning my sister called to tell me our father was dead, he was sitting 2 feet away from me, spilling coffee on my kitchen counter because he refuses to use a coaster. 6:30 in the morning, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I put the call on speaker without even thinking about it, the way you do when you're half asleep and just want to hear a voice. "Claire, Dad died last night," my sister Megan said, flat, like she was reading a grocery list. "Derek and I are handling the estate. You get nothing." Behind her, Derek, my brother-in-law, said something I couldn't fully make out, but I caught the tone. Satisfied, almost cheerful. My father set his mug down slowly. He looked at that phone for a long 3 seconds, and then he leaned toward it and said something back. I'm not going to tell you what it was yet because Megan didn't get to hear it that morning either. You'll hear it exactly where she finally did. But here's what neither of them knew standing in their kitchen in Bartlesville that morning, already dividing up a dead man's life. The funeral they were planning to cash in on was going to happen on a Sunday, and my father was going to pick the flowers himself. Welcome to Quiet Justice Stories, where the people who get underestimated finally get their moment. We tell true accounts of family, betrayal, and the kind of justice that doesn't need to shout to be heard. If you've ever been the one nobody counted on, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And subscribe, because you are going to want to see how this one ends. 8 months before that phone call, my biggest problem was whether I could afford new brakes on my Civic. I was an occupational therapist working outpatient rehab in Tulsa, 20 minutes from my father's house. My dad, Walter Bennett, was 71 that spring. Walter Bennett spent 34 years driving long haul for a trucking company out of Tulsa, hauling everything from lumber to refrigerated produce across I-44 and I-40. Home every other weekend if the routes lined up right. He married my mother, Diane, in 1979. They bought a modest 3-bedroom house on Birch Street in Broken Arrow in 1985 and paid it off free and clear by 2011. Dad wasn't wealthy, he was Oklahoma wealthy, the kind of rich that looks like a paid-off house, a decent 401k, and a 1996 Ford F-250 he babied like a third daughter. My mother died of ovarian cancer in the spring of 2022. Dad grieved the way he did everything, quietly, methodically, without asking anyone to watch him do it. He kept her garden going. He still set 2 coffee cups out some mornings before catching himself. Every Sunday, without fail, he called me and I called him. We were fine. Everyone said we were fine. Then, that October, on an ordinary bright Tuesday, my 71-year-old father decided he didn't need help trimming the big oak branch hanging over his garage roof. He climbed a ladder with a pole saw. He fell 12 feet. It wasn't fatal. It wasn't even close to fatal. A shattered left hip, a surgery, a rod and some pins, 6 weeks of rehab minimum. An inconvenience with hardware is how I described it to my coworkers. I drove to St. Francis Hospital the same afternoon, and when I walked into his room, Megan was already there, holding his hand for the benefit of a nurse who'd just walked in, and Derek was in the hallway on his phone using his real estate voice, the one he uses when he's talking about property, not people. "You don't need to rearrange your whole life for this, Claire," Derek told me in the hallway, squeezing my shoulder like he was closing on a listing. "Megan and I have got it covered. Family takes care of family." At the time, it sounded almost sweet. It took me months to understand what it actually was, a man quietly filing a claim. I asked the discharge nurse about follow-up care, about his medication schedule, about physical therapy referrals. Megan cut in before the nurse finished. "We already talked to the case manager, Claire. It's all handled. You've got work. We're right here in Broken Arrow." Dad, groggy and pumped full of painkillers, gave me a weak thumbs up from the bed. "Go on, kiddo. I'm in good hands." So I went back to my apartment, back to my patients, back to my life 20 minutes away, because the 2 people standing closest to my father kept telling me it was handled. I want that on the record because it matters for everything that comes after. I didn't stay away because I didn't care. I stayed away because I was told over and over that caring wasn't required of me right now. Dad moved into Megan and Derek's place in Bartlesville that November, 40 minutes from his own house, just until the hip heals, they said. And this is where the first document appeared, the honest one. His left hand still worked fine, but his balance was shot. He couldn't drive, and Derek suggested a limited power of attorney so Megan could handle his bills and his Medicare paperwork while he recovered. A notary came to the house. Dad signed with his good hand. I want to be clear about this part. That document was legitimate, reasonable, boring. I would have suggested the same thing. That's what makes this kind of thing work. It never opens with a crime. It opens with a favor, and the favor is real. Megan posted a photo that week. Dad in a recliner, a blanket over his legs, a mug of tea on the side table. Caption, "Taking care of my daddy. Blessed doesn't even cover it." 90-some likes. Half our old church directory commented, "Praying for Walter." Meanwhile, on a Sunday call, Derek walked me through their plan for Dad's recovery and referred to the house on Birch Street, the one my parents paid off with 30 years of long-haul routes, as the asset. Said it the way you'd mention the weather. I caught it. "You mean Dad's house?" I asked. He laughed it off. "Realtor brain. Sorry, force of habit." Dad noticed things too, later he told me. He noticed the notary brought the paperwork to his bedside instead of the kitchen table. He noticed the pen was already uncapped before he'd even finished reading the first page. But his hip ached. The oxycodone made everything feel like tomorrow's problem. And the document said what it said. Bills only. He signed it. It was the last piece of paper they ever let him actually read before asking for a signature. Then, one polite brick at a time, the wall went up. My Sunday calls stopped reaching him and started landing on Megan instead. "He's resting, Claire. I'll tell him you called." 2 weeks straight, I didn't hear my father's actual voice. His old flip phone, he said later, had stopped working. I bought him a smartphone myself, set it up, loaded my number as a favorite, and shipped it to Megan's house with tracking. Delivered, the confirmation said. "Oh, that," Megan told me over the phone, breezy. "Dad didn't want it. You know how he gets with technology." My father drove 18 trailers through blizzards on unlit mountain passes for 30 decades. He is not afraid of a touchscreen. I asked to video call him directly. I offered to drive up and sit with him during a PT session. I asked which orthopedic surgeon was following his hip so I could call the office myself, nurse to nurse if I had to. Every time I hit the same soft, cheerful wall. "He's napping. We've got this. Why are you being like this, Claire?" Here's the thing, nobody tells you about a situation like ours. When a grown man is legally competent and the people around him keep insisting he's fine, a daughter 40 minutes away has no lever to pull. There's no hotline for, "My sister keeps answering his phone." I was a working occupational therapist with my own caseload, my own bills, and the 2 people inside that house kept smiling at me through the glass every single time I tried to look in. Megan ended one call with a line I've never been able to shake. "You chose your career, Claire. Let the people who actually show up handle it." I drove up anyway for Thanksgiving, and at that table, in a house that used to be my second home growing up, my father's chair had been pushed into the corner by the window, out of the light, out of the conversation, close to see everyone and be seen by no one. And that's where this story really begins. Thanksgiving of that year, Dad had just turned 72 that December, and the hip had technically healed, but something else had settled onto him instead. A smallness I'd never seen on him before. He sat in that corner chair by the window while Megan fielded every question aimed at him. "Dad, how's the hip doing?" "He's doing great, aren't you, Daddy?" His coffee was decaf, doctor's orders, though I later learned no doctor had ever said any such thing. He'd lost weight. His flannel shirt hung off him the way it never used to. I got him alone for 10 minutes on the back porch, both of us pretending we needed fresh air and 30-degree Oklahoma wind. He looked at me sideways, and for just a second, the old spark came back. "My checkbook's on a diet, kiddo," he said. I asked what he meant. He told me the bank statements used to come to Birch Street. Now everything was paperless, and the login lived on Derek's laptop. He'd asked to see the accounts twice. Both times, Derek clapped him on the shoulder and said, "That's what you've got me for, Walt." I went back inside and asked Megan calmly in the kitchen if we could all sit down after the holidays and go through Dad's finances together as a family. Derek appeared in the doorway like he'd been summoned by radar. Family doesn't need spreadsheets, Claire, unless you're accusing somebody of something. Notice the move. I'd asked about bank statements. He'd introduced the word accusing. Megan started crying on cue about how nobody appreciates everything she does, how nobody understands what it's like to be the one who actually stayed. And my father, because he is a decent, conflict-avoidant man, and decent men make the softest hostages, patted my hand and said, "Don't start something at Thanksgiving, kiddo. I'm fine." By January, I'd stopped getting real answers on Sunday calls entirely, so I took a Friday off, told nobody, and drove to Bartlesville unannounced. Megan opened the door, startled, then recovered fast. "Oh, you just missed him. He's up at the cabin with some old CB radio buddies. Bad timing." A cabin in January in Oklahoma? I drove to Dad's actual house on Birch Street and just stood in the yard a while. The grass was dead and overgrown under frost, the mailbox stuffed past its lid, curtains shut tight in the middle of the day, a house holding its breath. On my way out of town, I stopped for gas and ran into Hank Coley, my father's oldest friend from his trucking days, a man who'd ridden shotgun with Dad on runs to Denver back in the 80s. Hank looked at me strange. "Walt hasn't been to the diner in 3 months, hun. We figured he moved in with you." Not with me, not on any cabin. I called Megan from the gas station lot. She didn't even pause. "Oh, that's his other CB crowd. You wouldn't know them." One lie stacked neatly on top of the last, like cordwood. I drove back to Tulsa with a knot in my stomach that didn't loosen for 3 days. Then Megan sent me a photo. Dad in an armchair, smiling thinly, a mug in his hand. "Dad's doing great. Stop checking up on us." I stared at that photo a long time. There was something small in the background I couldn't place. It would take me 5 more months to understand what it was. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday evening in March. Renee Ortiz, an OT I used to work with at St. Francis, had picked up a per diem shift at a long-term care facility called Sunridge Manor, out past Skiatuck, 45 minutes from my apartment. Her voice was careful. "Claire, there's a resident here who came in back in January, asks every staff member on every shift if they know an OT named Claire, says he's her daughter." I couldn't speak. She kept going, gentle. "His name's Walter Bennett, hun. Is that your dad?" I stood in my kitchen with my keys still in my hand. Nobody had said the words nursing home to me, not once. As far as I knew, my father was recovering comfortably in his son-in-law's guest room, 40 minutes from his own front door. Renee said one more thing before I hung up, and it's the thing that put me in my car within an hour. "He presents like somebody misplaced him." I didn't call Megan. I didn't call Derek. Some conversations you have on the phone, and some you have in person, in daylight, with a badge on your chest and paperwork in your hand. Sunridge Manor sat off a county road behind a sign missing half its letters. The smell hit first, disinfectant over something older underneath it. One aide covering a wing that needed 4. A medication cart parked and locked mid-morning with the 9 o'clock doses still showing pending. I'm an OT. I know understaffing when I walk into it, and I know it's not the aide's fault. It's the fault of everyone who put a competent man in that building and stopped checking on him. He was in a shared room at the end of the hall, second bed, window that didn't open. My father, a man who once wrestled an engine block out of a stalled semi on the shoulder of I-40 in July heat, was maybe 15 pounds lighter, in a shirt I didn't recognize. But when the door opened, his eyes came up sharp, whole, present. "Took you long enough, kiddo," he said. "They told me you knew. They told me you'd signed off on all of it." They hadn't just hidden him from me, they'd told each of us the other one had agreed to it. We spent an hour untangling 5 months of careful lying, and every knot had the same 2 sets of fingerprints. His flip phone hadn't broken. Megan took it to protect him from scam calls. The smartphone I shipped never made it to him at all. My letters, I'd written 3, never got past whoever collected the mail at Megan's house.
Back in January, Derek told him they needed him out of the house for just 2 weeks while they handled some insurance repairs on the guest bathroom. The 2 weeks became a hallway at Sunridge and a roommate who talked to the ceiling at night. And through it all, they'd told him I knew, that I was too busy with work, that I hadn't asked. There was nothing wrong with my father's mind. I ran him through orientation questions out of habit, the date, the president, serial 7s backwards from 100. He rolled his eyes at me halfway through. It's Wednesday and your quiz is easier than Derek explaining a mortgage rate, sharp as ever. That fact was about to matter enormously. Then he lowered his voice and said the sentence that turned my worry into something colder. Whatever paper got me stuck in here, kiddo, I never signed a second one. The administrator recited the script he'd clearly been handed before. Only the responsible party, Derek Voss, POA, could authorize discharge. I asked one question. Was there any diagnosis of cognitive impairment on file? Dementia, incapacity, anything at all? Silence while he clicked through the chart. There wasn't one, because none existed. My father had been admitted as a voluntary placement on a vague letter about needing support with daily living. A competent adult is not a package in storage. 20 minutes and one mention of the state ombudsman later, my father signed his own discharge. Right hand steady, letters clean. We drove to a bank branch together on a Tuesday because Walter Bennett was still the account holder of record, and an account holder is entitled to his own statements. 11 pages. He read them the way he used to read a bad engine diagnostic. Slow, twice, no cursing out loud. In 5 months, $164,000 had left his accounts, $38,000 labeled care expenses for a man eating instant oatmeal at Sunridge, $71,000 wired to something called DV Holdings LLC, and stapled behind it a courtesy copy of something worse, a home equity line of credit application on the Birch Street house, $120,000, pending, signed Walter Bennett, dated February 9th. On February 9th, my father was 45 minutes away, asking nursing assistants if anyone knew his daughter. We hired an elder law attorney named Patricia Nguyen out of downtown Tulsa, reading glasses on a chain, a handshake like a filing cabinet closing. She moved fast. A notarized revocation of every power of attorney, filed with the bank and the county recorder. A signature dispute letter that froze the HELOC application cold before a single dollar moved. A fraud report with the bank and a call with Adult Protective Services. And buried in the bank's own file was the thing we didn't have before, a second power of attorney, full authority, notarized January 12th at 10:15 in the morning, at an office 20 minutes from Sunridge. My father's intake log for that same morning showed him at Sunridge for a mandatory physical therapy session from 9 to 11, staff initials logged at every 15-minute interval. A man cannot be in physical therapy in one building and signing papers in another. The paper had lied, and now the paper was about to tell on itself.
Dad sat back from that kitchen table, and something in his face shifted. Grief clocking out, a decision clocking in. "Dead men don't sign papers," he said, "so let's introduce these two to a real one." That night, Megan sent me a single text, no greeting. "Dad will choose us. He always needs the ones who actually stay close. You've got a career and an apartment. He'll figure out which daughter actually built a life around him." I read it to Dad because we'd made a rule. No more secrets managed on his behalf by anyone, ever. He looked at it a long moment, then out the window. "She thinks staying close to a man is the same as standing by him," he said, and handed the phone back. "Call Hank. Tell him I finally need that favor he's owed me since 1988. He laid out the plan at my kitchen table that night over decaf he poured himself as a joke. Patricia had already warned us what was coming, a contested guardianship petition if Derek got desperate enough, dragging things out for weeks while a frozen HELOC waited for its chance to thaw. Men like Derek don't fight to win. They fight to run the clock while the money finds an exit. "They need me incapacitated or gone to finish this," Dad said. "So let's give them gone, the version with better catering." He'd already thought through the lines and refused to cross any of them.
No fake death certificate, no false report to any agency, no insurance claim, no lie to a single police officer. Just one phone call, friend to family, and a memorial his old CB and trucking buddies would throw for one of their own, the way they'd done for others before him. Lying to people who are actively lying to you isn't a felony. Patricia confirmed it twice before Dad would move forward. Tell greedy people the man is gone, and they won't pause to grieve. They'll rush to produce whatever paperwork they're sitting on, in public, in front of witnesses, because they can't afford probate questions later. And using a forged document out loud in front of a room, that has an ugly legal name, and it comes with handcuffs. Hank Coley made the call from his porch, Dad and I listening on speaker 3 feet away, my father auditing the announcement of his own death with his arms crossed like a man checking a repair estimate. Hank's voice did the thing 40 years of hauling freight and burying old friends teaches a man. Soft, settling, final. "Megan, honey, it's Hank. It's about your dad. He passed last night in his sleep." 3 full seconds of silence. And into that silence, my sister's first words weren't, "Where is he?" or "Was he in pain?" They were, Where was he staying? Was anything with him? Papers, I mean. Dad's face didn't move. His hand did, knuckles whitening around his coffee mug once, then easing. 23 minutes after that call ended, phone records later showed, Derek called the HELOC lender's office line and left a voicemail asking about disbursement timelines. Grief, apparently, keeps business hours. Which brings us back to where this story started. My kitchen, 6:30 that Friday morning, my father spilling coffee on the counter, the phone lighting up with Megan's name. I put it on speaker. "Claire, Dad died last night. Derek and I are handling the estate. You get nothing." And behind her, Derek, close to the phone, wanting me to hear him, something satisfied, something almost gleeful. My father leaned toward that phone, close enough that the steam off his coffee fogged the screen, and said the thing I promised you at the beginning of this story. My thumb had been resting on mute since the call connected, because we'd agreed the trap needed one more day. What he said was for Sunday. She'd hear it standing up in front of the whole town. So will you. I asked Megan for time before the funeral. Her last words before hanging up were, "Fine, but don't you dare bring some lawyer to a funeral, Claire. Have some class." They spent that Saturday exactly like themselves. Megan posted a black and white photo of Dad by 9 a.m. "Rest easy, Daddy. Your girl was with you till the end." 200 reactions by lunch. And that's when I finally understood the photo she'd sent me back in the winter, the one with "Stop checking on us." Same armchair, same wall clock behind him frozen at the same time in both photos, same shirt. He'd been gone from that house since January. Her proof of life pictures had all come from one single afternoon, recycled for months like leftovers. A neighbor on Birch Street called me that same Saturday, confused. A van in Dad's driveway, a man changing the locks, before the funeral, before the body they didn't have was even in the ground. Sunday came. 60 folding chairs at the VFW hall in Bartlesville, one closed casket borrowed from a showroom floor, a photo of Dad in his old Teamster's jacket from 1987, and carnations everywhere because Mom always said carnations were a filler flower and Dad never once let her forget it. Megan walked in wearing new shoes and carrying a folder. Derek worked the room like it owed him closing costs. Hank stepped to the podium. Before we share memories of Walter, the families asked to say a few words about his affairs. They'd requested it themselves that morning, lambs volunteering for the spit. Derek opened his folder and read it to the room, a will dated the previous month, leaving the Birch Street house, the accounts, the F-250, everything to Megan and himself. "And to my daughter Claire," he read, finding my face at the back wall, "I leave nothing, for reasons she knows." He smiled reading it. That smile is the single most expensive thing that man has ever worn. 60 chairs shifted at once. People who'd known my father for 30 years, who'd heard him brag about his OT daughter at every diner counter in 3 counties, did the math and didn't like the answer. The side door clicked. My father walked into his own funeral in a pressed suit and shoes shined to glass, one measured step at a time, 40 years of driving through blizzards behind every footfall. A casserole dish hit the floor. Renee let out one clean bark of a laugh before clamping both hands over her mouth. Someone said loudly, "Well, I'll be damned." Megan didn't scream. She simply stopped, white as the flowers, and forgot how her own face worked. Derek froze mid-podium, the forged will still raised in his hand in full view of 60 witnesses and one lawyer with a briefcase in the back corner. "Nice box, Hank. Little roomy." Then he found Derek's eyes. "Dead men don't sign papers, son, and they surely don't check their voicemail about a HELOC 23 minutes after they die." Derek tried to sell himself out of it. Elder confusion, manipulation, exactly the guardianship script he'd rehearsed for weeks. The room didn't buy a word. It had just watched a confused, manipulated man cross 100 feet of hardwood like he was inspecting a formation. Patricia stood, buttoned her jacket, and laid it out in 11 calm minutes. The revocation on file with the county, the physical therapy log proving Derek's notary date was impossible, the $71,000 wired to DV Holdings LLC. The D is for Derek, the V, I'll assume, is not for victim, she noted pleasantly, and the witness signature on the forged will belonging to a loan officer from Derek's own office, sitting in the 4th row holding a casserole dish. He turned the color of old drywall. The county sheriff's deputies came in right on schedule, unhurried, the way men walk when the outcome's already filed. Derek was still explaining interest rates to them as they walked him out. Megan broke last, dropping into a folding chair. "We were drowning, Daddy, the condo, the cards. Derek said it was temporary." But then in the very next breath to me, "But you made it worse. If you'd just stayed out of it." I looked at my sister, the one who used to braid my hair before school. "You called me before sunrise to tell me I get nothing, Megan. I'm the only one walking out of this room with everything I came in with." Derek was charged with forgery, theft from an elderly person, and falsifying a loan document. His real estate license was suspended within the month, revoked by fall. DV Holdings was dissolved by the receiver. Between bank restitution and the clawback, Dad recovered $127,000 of the $164,000 taken. The HELOC never touched the house. Megan took a plea, 3 years probation, restitution, and community service, which the judge assigned to a nursing home. She reads to residents nobody visits on Saturdays. Dad's back at the diner every Thursday with Hank, and the two of them started a free monthly talk at the VFW hall called Papers While You're Breathing, teaching people his age how to spot a signature too pretty to be real. 11 people came the first month. They're setting up extra chairs now. I moved my hours to part-time and drive out every Sunday. Dad burns the bacon on purpose, still claims I like it that way. My mother's clock ticks on the mantel again, and in his wallet, where a torn scrap of paper with my number used to hide, he now keeps a single dried carnation. "Best funeral I never had," he tells people. My father taught me the measure of a man was never the number in his account. It's whether his voice still stands while he's breathing, and whether the people who love him would rather guard it than inherit it. If this reminded you to check your parents' paperwork, or your own, do it this week while everybody's still above ground. Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. And subscribe because this town isn't done talking about it yet.